following case involves real events and unsolved mysteries. Based on factual reporting, it explores disturbing circumstances. Viewer discretion is advised. The darkness is real, and sometimes the truth remains hidden in the shadows.
Late April of 1924. Big lava lake tore along a fault of thinning ice, the crack echoing like distant artillery. 3 pale shapes slid up through the fracture and bobbed on the black water. Searchers rowed closer, shirt sleeves, wrists lashed in cloth, the cheap cabin cloth used for feed sacks and bandages. Nichols's glasses still clung to his face. His pocket watch ticked no more. Its hands arrested at 9:10. The bodies had begun to decay in the gunpowder air, yet the mountains stood silent, as if winter itself were holding its breath. 3 men, 90 days under ice, and someone strong enough and angry enough to drag them here and trust the cold to bury the evidence. The winter of 1923 and 1924 hit Oregon's Central Cascades like a lid on a coffin. Snow climbed past 6 feet, muffling the ponderosa forest and sealing the rapidly growing town of Bend, 80 rough miles away, behind drifts and silence. In that snow desert, a single-room log cabin blinked lantern light against the dark. Timber boss Ed Logan let trustworthy caretakers stay rent-free so long as they kept his 5 silver foxes alive and split any fur they trapped on their 30-mile line. That winter, the caretakers were 3 names still echoing in band saloons: Edward Nichols, former blacksmith and divorced father of 2; Roy Wilson, broad-chested Marine Corps veteran; and Edward Dewey Morris, only 23, eyes bright with the first winter that might buy his future. On the night of January 15, 1924, resort owner Alan Wilcoxon snowshoed in, warmed his beard by the stove, and found the trio flush with a lot of money and talk of spring. He left at dawn on the 16th, becoming the last outsider ever to see them alive. Sometime in that narrow window, the trapping route went silent. On January 22nd, a tall man matching Charles Kimsey's description sold 4 silver fox fur in Portland, fur tagged to Nichols's license. A hard trek from Lava Lake to the train station takes 5 days at best. Whoever made that sale left the mountains almost immediately after Wilcoxon's visit. Back at the cabin, time simply stopped. When searchers finally broke in months later, the wall calendar still shouted January. Stew had boiled dry on the iron stove. Rifles, coats, and snowshoes hung untouched, as if their owners had stepped outside for a moment and never returned. February passed with no Roy Wilson at his mother's door. She hammered at the sheriff's desk, then at her son-in-law, H.D. Ines, begging him to get up that mountain. Roads were buried, but in early April, Ines and Owen Morris pushed the Ford until it died in a snowbank, then strapped snowshoes and trudged the last miles to Little Lava Lake. They arrived on April 13th. The door groaned open. A starved cat streaked past them toward the empty fox pens. Inside lay scattered magazines, untouched bedrolls, and a hammer stained with blood near the slaughtered foxes. The cabin's cargo sled, Logan's revolver, and every pelt were gone. Ines and Owen raced through the night to Bend. Deputy C.A. Adams followed the sled groove 3/4 of a mile to Big Lava Lake, where the missing sled sat half melted into slush, its boards lacquered in frozen blood. Across the refreezing ice lay pools of dark frozen blood, sandy brown hair, and a single human tooth. A neat rectangle had been chopped through the ice and skimmed over again. Adams posted men to watch the lake while Spring gnawed the ice. 10 days later, the sheet split with a rifle shot crack, revealing 3 pale shapes bobbing in the water, so black it looked like ink spilled on snow. One deputy leaned over the boat's edge, flicked the lasso. The rope creaked under sudden weight as the first body turned face up, bound in cloth, stripped, shirt sleeves. Nichols's glasses still rode the bridge of his nose. His watch was forever frozen at 9:10. This is where the mystery truly begins. The 3 bodies leaned over the boat's edge and thumped onto the snow like sacks of wet sand. Deputy Adams nicked the cloth with a pocket knife and peeled it back. A shotgun blast had left a fatal shotgun wound in the man's chest. Smaller punctures, tight as coins, mapped a revolver's path across his ribs. The same cloth that once wrapped fur now served as shroud and binding. That night, frost regrew over the sled grooves as if the forest itself wanted the evidence to sleep. Shot, bound, clubbed. Nichols, 2 blasts from a 12-gauge shotgun. Wilson, 132 through the heart. Morris, a revolver shot across his skull, then the blunt edge of a claw hammer to be sure silence stayed quiet. No defensive wounds. Whoever pulled the trigger held complete control. Coroner Tiny Noble could do little more. Spring sun warmed the remains faster than he could work. Fingerprints softened. Gunpowder burns blurred, and the odor spread across the lake. There was no refrigeration, no forensic lab, not even plaster to cast the boot prints that ringed the chopping hole. By the 3rd afternoon, the bodies were already in rough pine coffins bound for Bentown. Evidence died with them. Deputy Adams and Sheriff Roberts still had the cabin, and at a glance it looked gift-wrapped with clues. Coats and rifles on pegs, coffee cups half full, the wall calendar screaming January while the present world was April. Outside, the fox pens were a mess. 5 silver foxes shot, skinned, and stripped of their luxurious fur. A trail of broad sled runner grooves, darkened by drips of blood and clumps of sandy brown hair, led straight to the hole in Big Lava Lake. But the crime scene never stood a chance. Curiosity seekers no-shoed in and pocketed souvenirs. Someone lifted the bloody hammer before officers could tag it. Even the sled, the single object tracing cabin to dump site, was dragged down back to town and scrubbed so town folks could stare at the stain. One reporter wrote that the county's best leads melted like the snow around them. Within a week at the sheriff's office floated a theory as thin as spring ice. Maybe the men fought, shot one another, and somehow wrapped themselves in cloth before sinking under the lake. Ben locals left it straight out of the newspaper. The only story that fit the evidence and the missing fox fur pointed toward a drifter with a grudge, Charles Kimsey. Yet, Kimsey was already gone, hitching rides between lodging camps, the law always one town behind. Frustration curdled into obsession. Trappers now carried shotguns. Mothers locked doors that had never known a key. And still, the killer walked free. Dragged this far beneath the ice. Tap subscribe. Don't surface yet. Your click drags the investigation into the light. Let's have a look at the theories that followed. Number 1. The Kimsey vengeance. From the day the body surfaced, one name carried the weight of a shotgun hammer. Charles Edward Kimsey, rail rider, horse thief, and logger, had sworn in 1923 that he'd get Nichols even if it takes all winter. He claimed Nichols owed him $500, a debt he meant to settle in blood. Kimsey knew the terrain. He and Nichols had trapped those very lines the season before. On January 22, 1924, just days after the trio vanished, a tall man with Kimsey's crooked nose and tobacco-stained mustache sold 4 silver fox furs in Portland, furs traced to Ed Logan's ranch. That sale required a grueling hike from Little Lava Lake to the train station, timing that fits the murder window like a cartridge in a chamber. 2 years later, Kimsey burst into the Harrison farmhouse near Klamath Falls, shot Lillian Harrison in the back, beat her husband unconscious, and fled on a stolen horse, proving he had no shortage of violence or nerve. He was caught, convicted, and sentenced to life. Yet the Lava Lake file on him stayed stamped insufficient evidence. No eyewitness placed him north of Klamath that January. The boot prints were too melted to match. The bloody clawhammer had vanished. The strongest motive in Oregon slipped its handcuffs. Theory 2. 2 men to drag 3. Skeptics pointed to logistics. 3 adult bodies, rifles, revolver, fox fur, nearly 600 pounds, hauled 3/4 of a mile by sled. 1 man might manage it, but 2 would do it faster and leave fewer tracks of struggle. Enter Ray Van Buren, a drifter with a drooping eyelid and a taste for Kimsey's whiskey. Witnesses later claimed the pair were seen together in the Dales, flashing rolls of cash and boasting of fox fur money. Van Buren disappeared before deputies could question him. Some whispered he sank beneath Odell Lake, chained to his own trapline. No document ever proved he'd set foot at Lava Lake, but the rumor gained traction. If there were 2 killers, the deep gouges in the sled track make grim sense. 1 man pulling, the other pushing, their breath fogging in the moonlight as they slid the dead across snow quiet enough to hear wing beats. Yet this theory hangs on shadows. No payroll stub, no rail ticket, no photograph. Van Buren remains a ghost. Kimsey might or might not have summoned. Theory 3. A cabin dispute turned fatal. The sheriff's office floated one last possibility. 3 trappers, a bottle, a quarrel over money, and a gun that solved the argument. Perhaps Wilson shot Nichols, Morris shot Wilson, and the last man alive, half mad and panicking, wrapped his friends, then himself, in cloth, and tried to disappear beneath the ice. It reads like cabin fever on a page, but the evidence rebels. All rifles stayed on pegs. Logan's revolver was missing. No defensive wounds marked the victims. Each shot came from angles suggesting they never fired back. And most damning, fox fur worth thousands were gone. A self-ruining suicide pact does not steal furs and sell them in Portland. The theory died just the way the cabin fire had, choking on its own smoke. Pick your culprit and the crime rearranges itself like tracks in falling snow. Choose Kimsey and the motive roars, but the proof whispers. Add Van Buren and the sled moves faster. Blame the men themselves and the foxfur vanishes. No matter which story you clutch, the wind outside that cabin still howls one question. What voice in the dark convinced 3 seasoned woodsmen to leave their rifles on the wall? Winter retreated, trees grinned again, and still the case laid frozen. By 1926, The Lava Lake murders had slipped from front pages into campfire lore. Yet one name, the embers hot. Charles Edward Kimsey re-emerged 3 years after the killings, riding a stolen horse into the Harrison farmhouse near Klamath Falls, shot his wife in the back, beat her husband, and left them for dead. This time the law moved fast. Kimsey was cornered, tried, and sentenced to life in the Oregon State Penitentiary. Beside those stone walls, he bragged of bad deeds but denied Lava Lake. "Can't hang snow on a man in July," he told one guard. Evidence melts, and memories blur. Prosecutors agreed. Justice, to the families, felt buried alive. And so years became decades. The cabin was reclaimed by moss. Silver fox fur went out of fashion. Bend unfolded into breweries and mountain bikes. Yet every spring thaw, locals say Big Lava Lake gives off a strange metallic chill, as if the water itself remembers lad runners scraping across its surface. What lingers is a riddle. 3 experienced woodsmen, disarmed by someone they likely knew, marched across snow and consigned to a grave of ice, while the killer, or killers, vanished into a country still wide enough for secrets. The investigation stalls here, unless you push it further. Who do you think carved those lead grooves? 1 vengeful man, or 2 shadows we never caught? Tell us below. Subscribe so you don't miss the next descent into cold case darkness, and share this story. Every new set of eyes keeps the ice from sealing over for good. Next time, the trail doesn't end in the woods. It ends in code. When Ricky McCormick's body turned up in a Missouri cornfield in 1999, pockets held 2 pages of letters and numbers no one could crack. The FBI still calls it one of America's last great ciphers. Can you read what Ricky wrote before he died? Join us. Grab the scans and bring a pencil. Mystery comes with homework.